This podcast is being recorded on Kaurna land. We honour and celebrate the strong cultural traditions of motherhood, family, and connection to country.
How Motherhood Changed Me is brought to you by Harrison Macmillan, Australia's leading recruitment firm run by women who live by values that make their mothers proud.
No woman can say motherhood hasn't changed her, but every mother's story is different.
If there was a kitchen knife straight away, I would think something horrible was going to happen to one of my children with that knife, even though it was way over there on the counter and I was way over here. Just graphic images would come into my mind about how I could keep them safe.
Wow.
Dogs off leashes, falling downstairs. I could be in the most safest environment, completely happy, but suddenly I was just met with these horrible images and I couldn't get rid of. It's so hard to explain. It's like, here I am, I'm really happy for the most part. I've got this beautiful baby that I love to pieces, and yet I'm projecting this ugliness into my life. What's wrong with me? And it felt really hard to talk about because I almost felt ashamed by it, I guess.
This is How Motherhood Changed Me. Hello, I'm Kerry Turner.
And I'm Jenna Gates. And if you're following us on Instagram, you might remember a clip we shared before we even launched the show. That was a little promo recording we did. I read out a poem written by the incredibly talented JESS URLICHs, and Kerry, it completely blew up.
It really did. And it continues to do so.
At the time of recording this, and I have to read this, it has had over 1.8 million views, over 62,000 likes, hundreds of comments, and close to 50,000 shares.
Nuts.
Now, that is probably just a regular Wednesday for Jess. She's got hundreds of thousands of fans all across the world. She's published her work in a number of books, and she is a Sunday Times bestseller. And we couldn't think of a better way to open up season 2. And thank you, Jess, for being part of our early success, and welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing my poem. For that lovely introduction.
It was beautiful words, and Jen here read it so beautifully, and it made me cry. It made me cry.
And it was real, you know. Kerry was
real.
like, I need the tissues. Anyway, beautiful.
Now, Jess, before we jump into a bit of a chat, could you give us a word to describe who you were before you had children?
Oh, one word. Goodness, that's a hard one. The first thing that comes to mind is probably ignorant.
Oh, that's relatable.
Yeah, not in every sense, but going into motherhood for sure. Yeah, that would be the word that I would use.
Yeah, for sure. And you have 3 children now. You share so openly and honestly about your motherhood experience in your poetry. Did writing start out as sort of a self-therapy to help you process your matrescence and your motherhood experience?
Yeah, it definitely did. And that's what writing has always kind of been to me, a form of therapy. But it kind of came in a way, like I didn't really have a huge village around me. I was the first of my friends to have a baby. And so I really felt like something was missing. Like I could feel myself shifting and changing. And the conversations that I wanted to have with my friends were kind of like stuck in between wanting to be that girl of yesterday, to be able to relate to them, but really wanting to talk about this new venture that I was on and all the feelings that I had, but I didn't know how to do that. I didn't even know how to do that, but especially with people that had absolutely no idea what I was going through. And so after a while, it just felt like, I guess, the natural thing to do. Like, when you share your work now, it's generally online. But I just never anticipated that I would grow this beautiful community of like-minded mothers here for the same journey.
And every piece of yours that I have read has resonated with me in some way. I can draw on an experience from my own motherhood journey with everything I read. So keep on writing, please.
Yeah. I do.
I wonder, did motherhood spark this creativity inside you, or was it something that you always had done?
I've always been a writer. I started writing poetry as early as I was able to put pen to paper. I had one of my first poems, it was up in the principal's office in primary school. And then one of my teachers in primary school also read one of my poems out at her wedding. So, I mean, it's something that like I've just always really, really loved to do. And I think as well, it's kind of like this way for me to make something that's, you know, seemingly ordinary so much more extraordinary through words. And as soon as I realized that I could do that, it just became something I kept doing. I didn't actually start writing again. I kind of had like this lull period, I guess, in my teens. It wasn't really so cool to be a poet, and I didn't really tell people that I love to write. And so I kind of just stopped for a while. And then it wasn't actually until my second was 6 months old, because I had them both a year apart. So it was, I mean, I felt like I was postpartum for at least, you know, two years, solid 2 years. And that's when I started writing again, because I just had so much raw emotion and I had to put it somewhere.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's creative outlet will look different and be different, but at the end of the day, it's that same reason, purpose, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe it's cooking for you, or maybe you get into art or something, but there's something really, it brings out almost the childlike when you become a mum. Yeah, Jess, I'm nowhere near on your level, but I like to write, and I found it was like I was almost cracked open a little bit when I had my babies, and I felt like that muscle sort of flexed a little bit. And, you know, it's definitely something that you have to work on though, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it definitely is. I kind of feel like, I mean, I go through these periods, like it could even be like 2 weeks where I don't really have any inspiration. And I mean, it's constant, you know, like it's actually the moments of chaos and some of the really hard times that I found myself in motherhood have been what's actually drawn inspiration. But if I have 2 weeks, and it's generally when things are like sort of plodding along and going pretty well, I find it really hard to write about that. It's so much easier to write about the harder times. And then I sort of think, oh gosh, you know, like I feel so much better when I'm writing. But what I have learned is that you really do have to just live life for inspiration. You can't just sit there every day and make yourself write. You have to just get out there, live life, and inspiration will just hit you when you least expect it.
Yeah, and
while you're cooking dinner or something. Quick, I've got to get this down.
2 a.m. breastfeeding, like that's pretty much. Those are where most of my poems were written in the nursing chair.
Why does it always hit you when you're almost asleep? I don't know if this is like for you, Jess, but I mean, I can lie there and think, oh, that's something really good. Like, you know, then I might completely waking myself up again, jumping on my phone to scribble down some notes.
The subconscious is taking over, I think, and that's where everything kind of like rises to the surface and you're like, oh my goodness, you know, I've got to get that down. And I do that. I've got like this notepad on my phone, and it's got like, there's probably at least 400 different, like, you know, little wee pieces of paper or whatever you call them on there, like different files. And some of them I look back on, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to do anything with that.
I can stay there.
And other ones I'm like, oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
What I really love about some of your stuff though, Jess, is the perspective shift you're able to help me sort of when you're in those early trenches of motherhood, and you've got some beautiful work that, you know, goes from the baby's perspective, and then there's also Dear Husband that sort of puts into perspective your partnership and your relationship and how, you know, we're in it right now, but think about it in the future. And I think it really helps you when you're in that sort of tough phase. And I'm sure that's why you're so successful and everybody can relate so much, because it's like, of course, yes.
You just have to read it and go, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Someone gets this and they're going through the same thing.
But also, like, my baby's not being manipulative.
Yes.
My baby just
is being a
wants
baby.
me, and thank gosh I can just, you know, soften into this and do what feels right.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of us, we get really, well, I know I did, I got really caught up in thinking that I had to know every single thing, read all the books, get my babies on this very structured sleep schedule. And it's when I started to soften into my knowledge of knowing that actually, even though it's very normal for a baby to constantly want to be close to their mum, it's, you know, biologically normal, it was also very normal for me to want to be close to my baby. And so that feeling of you know, walking away, listening to those cries. I mean, I remember we've got, you know, the postpartum care that comes after the midwife. I remember her saying, I jumped up really quickly when my baby was crying. She's like, oh, do you always go to your baby when he's crying? And I was like, well, yeah. You know, it's just instinctively what felt right to me. Like it was like sirens going off in my head. And she was like, oh, interesting. And started writing something down in her clipboard. And I thought, oh my gosh. And then I just started to like go back and doubt myself all over again. But, you know, it's just one of those things. It's like, I think, yeah, when you can soften into that knowledge of knowing that you actually do know what you're doing. And even though it feels like you don't, and it is the scariest thing in the world, it's very empowering.
And it's all of that outside noise, like you say, that does make you question it. Yeah, even that story that you've just shared, I have had a very similar experience. And possibly what some of your work has helped me be able to do is passively aggressively share to my Instagram story. It's like, hello, said family member. This is
what I'm thinking.
This is what I'm thinking about you. Like, back off. So thanks, Jess.
Yeah, I kind of find that really hard sometimes actually with some of the things that I share, because I do have a really supportive family. But one of the things I found really hard is when mum used to come, and no doubt she'll probably listen to this podcast. Love you, mum. But we have talked about this. And she used to come around and everything was about the baby, every single thing. And all I really wanted was just for her to say, how are you doing? Or if I was to tell her how I was doing, I would want her to listen, like really listen, wait for me to get to the end of my sentence. Or if I was cut off, I wanted her a couple minutes later to say, oh, what were you saying? You know, and that didn't happen much at the start. And so all of a sudden I kind of felt like I was fading into the background of my own life. And I really, like, I mean, you know, I loved being a mother. I loved being his mother. I loved him being the center of attention, but I also wanted to, I had stuff I had to say. I needed my mum as well.
You're still a person.
That was a really hard time.
You're still a person and you've got feelings. And yes, you're the person that's brought this baby into the world, but the focus doesn't need or shouldn't be only on the baby. Got to look after mums.
Yeah, hold the mum for sure.
This is a good time for me to bring up your wonderful poem, Not Just a Mother. And I've also ordered one of your shirts that says the same thing. Wish I could have worn it today. But that poem absolutely resonates with me as a stay-at-home mum, and I'm sure all stay-at-home mums have had a similar experience. Your identity's a bit lost. You get asked that question, or, you know, you have to fill in a form of
your occupation.
And it really makes you feel less than. But actually, motherhood is everything, and it's everything to me. And this choice, you know, I'm not just a mother, but mother is enough.
100%. And people forget that so often. And I mean, I was the same. I'd always sort of be like, oh, I'm just a mum. I'm just a stay-at-home mum. And yeah, you almost say it like you're embarrassed of it, or you feel like, yeah, you should be doing more. And it's like, well, this is actually this is definitely one of the hardest jobs, the hardest job that I have ever had. I mean, I've never had a job with more responsibility than this. And for some reason, even though we're moving mountains, we feel like we're not. We don't talk about it enough, or we talk about it, but then we are worried that we might be seeming ungrateful because it's not okay to talk about the lows, you know?
I just don't like the word just.
Yeah. It's the just part,
Yeah, just. It's in everything. And even if I'm sending an email and instinctively go to write, just touching base or just reaching out, I get rid of the just because I hate it.
It's just, well,
just.
There we go. We're saying it. But what I suppose I'm getting at, it's us softening ourselves a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as women, that's something that a lot of us do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I also wonder on that note, Jess, when did you feel confident to stand behind your writing and answer that question with, I'm a poet, I'm a writer?
It was a weird moment actually, because I've always wanted to be a writer and I never thought that it would actually happen. Like I never thought I'd publish a book. I never thought that I'd have a following. Like it's still weird, pinch me, kind of if I think about it too much, I don't want to share anything ever again. But it was probably around the time. So I used to have a different handle on my Instagram, and it was like Life with Harry and Holly. And it was very like, I would share vulnerable pieces, but they were a lot more chill than the pieces that I share now. And then it was like, someone was like, oh, you really need to put your poems into a book. I would buy it. And I was like, oh, really? Okay, cool. That's given me something to think about. And so I put my book together, self-published my first one, and I started writing down, like I made a note app in my phone for the orders. I thought that would be really cute. And then it actually became like a real thing. And it wasn't until I think I sold, I don't know, like maybe it might have been after my first month, I was like, I'm going to change my handle. I'm gonna call myself an author. I'm gonna be JESS URLICHS writer. And yeah, it just started to feel real after actually seeing my book climb the charts. I was like, oh, I am a writer now. This is cool. But I mean, you don't have to call yourself a writer just because your books are climbing the charts. But for me, it felt like a good time to do it.
Yeah.
Are you still tracking your orders on your phone?
No, it was a few days and I realized, oh my goodness, I'm going to need an Excel sheet for this.
So funny. Well, we are so blown away by the comments that came through on that clip that we shared of your lovely poem. The way people open up and the way they're
very honest.
Yeah. And we were really moved and touched by that. And I'm sure that happens to you all the time, Jess. You're being vulnerable, but that in turn helps someone else be able to be vulnerable back.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I have found with sharing my pieces. And I mean, it started like me reading pieces from other writers. It was like giving me that permission to be vulnerable. And it felt so much less scary putting my first works out there after having read somebody else's. It was beautifully honest as well. And I've had people message me saying, you've inspired me to write poetry. You've inspired me to actually open up to my husband about how he's feeling, or talk to my mum about how I'm feeling. Those messages mean the absolute world to me. It's just, I never get sick of seeing those messages.
Yeah, it's so special. You've got that power to connect with people. You don't know them. They're complete strangers. But through your beautiful words, you've connected and struck a chord. And
to know you're helping someone not feel alone. Yeah, that's really beautiful, Jess. We all know that it takes a village to raise a child, and our friends at Harrison Macmillan know that it also takes a team to build a successful business.
And they're here to help you find the right team members.
Mums understand the value of asking for help, and businesses should too.
Harrison Macmillan specialises in recruiting top talent, so you don't have to go it alone. They have the experience and network to ensure you get the best candidates.
With over 500 clients across Australia, they are well known for their people-centric expertise.
They don't see themselves as just a recruitment agency, but as your strategic talent partner committed to meeting your unique staffing challenges.
And outsourcing to them means you can focus on what you do best.
Visit harrisonmacmillan.com.au to learn more about how they can support your business, just like a village supports a family. Now, Jess, can we ask you, and if not, that is okay, about your experience with postnatal anxiety, something we can both relate to?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. I'm more than happy to share.
What were the signs that made you start to think something might be going on?
It started off with intrusive thoughts. It's sort of, I think it might have been situational to begin with, because I did have a pretty traumatic birth, and breastfeeding was very, very difficult for me. And I put so much pressure on myself to be able to breastfeed my first, because I just thought, in order to be a good mum, this is what I have to do. And it just wasn't working out for us. And that really snowballed my anxiety as well. Every time he would wake, I felt so anxious, so nervous. I just, like that fear of him waking up to feed, it was crippling. There were also other signs with fatigue and stress, intrusive thoughts can actually be very common. And I think I had experienced them in my past before becoming a mum, but becoming a mum really brought it all to the fore. And that's when I started to realize that it was starting to kind of stop me in my tracks. And that's when I needed to talk to someone about it. For example, some of those thoughts would be, Like if there was a kitchen knife straight away, I would think something horrible was going to happen to one of my children with that knife, even though it was way over there on the counter and I was way over here. Just graphic images would come into my mind about how I could keep them safe.
Wow.
Dogs off leashes, falling downstairs. I could be in the most safest environment, completely happy, but suddenly I was just met with these horrible images and I couldn't get rid of. I mean, it's so hard to explain. It's like, here I am, I'm really happy for the most part. I've got this beautiful baby that I love to pieces, and yet I'm projecting this ugliness into my life. What's wrong with me? And it felt really hard to talk about because I almost felt ashamed by it, I guess.
Is it something that you identified, Jess, or did your husband bring up, is everything okay? You're not yourself? Or was it completely just in your head and no one else had any clue?
No, my husband definitely had seen a change in me. And it went sort of far beyond the baby blues. It continued on for quite a long time. And even when I made the decision to move my son onto formula, I thought, oh, this is going to help, even though I'm going to battle with my own demons and my own guilt around this is definitely going to help. And it did. But it didn't completely make those thoughts go away. It didn't ease the anxiety that I was feeling on a day-to-day basis. And it was just, we were sitting around the dinner table one night and I just blurted it out and I just said, I don't feel like myself. Every day I wake up and I just don't feel good and something's wrong and I need to talk to someone about it. And he was really supportive and not overly surprised. And that was the start. It was the opening up that, was the beginning.
And how has...
Make me cry, Jess.
Yeah.
It's all so relatable. So very relatable. Yeah. Anyway.
No, I mean, what I was thinking, to be honest, to take it back while you were talking that, because Kerry and I have spoken how we felt like that in the early stages.
Yeah.
And one thing that went through my mind, I wonder if you girls can relate to this, is, they talk about the mother's intuition. Like, is this mother's intuition? Like, that's what was holding me back probably from saying anything, because I was like, they say that the mother knows. And that was what I was holding on to in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, actually, this isn't a normal thought. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And I guess that comes, everyone's experience and symptoms and signs are all so different. For me, it was just, like Jess said, I wasn't myself. I just didn't feel right.
And it took you, somebody else flagging it with you,
Absolutely.
for you to be able to realise, because you're in this new thing and you're like, this is just life now. Yeah.
And I would sit on my own at home with a baby each day, not feeling great, but tiredness. You put it down to fatigue, the constant demands of having a newborn. And it is only when that one person raised it, who was my husband, and the floodgates open, much like right now. And it's just so overwhelming that you think you've hidden it and you think you've kept it to yourself, you're coping, you're dealing with it, and you're not. So getting help is, very important.
I wonder how it's shaped your work, Jess, too, having that experience.
Well, I mean, for starters, that's because I had no one to really talk to that I had gone through it at that time. That was another reason why I wanted to share, because I wanted to talk to other people that had gone through it so I could feel validated. Because a lot of people say, oh, your writing is so validating, but it really is, has been a two-way street for me, because I didn't know who else to talk to about it. There was nobody in my friend circle that had a baby. There is now. And, because we're talking 5 years down the track, 6 years down the track, actually. And a lot of my friends even now, they're like, I'm so sorry. We showed up at 10 a.m. in the morning with a bottle of wine to congratulate you with your baby. Like we had no idea. And I'm like, it's cool. Like it's fine. You know, you don't know what you don't know. And I also don't want you to have to know what postnatal anxiety is like, because it's not nice. It is awful. It's not a good thing to go through, but it is common. And if you do have someone that you can talk to about it, it is such a game changer. Such a game changer. And it doesn't have to be someone that has gone through it either. I will say, like, you know, my husband, he didn't know what it was like, but he was someone that I trusted and someone who cared deeply for me. And so that is a very good start.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Given that experience, and I'm not sure if you're an anxious person or have that sort of natural worriness about you, because I certainly do, but in sharing your work, does that take a lot for you to be open and vulnerable and
put yourself
out there?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely does. That feeling of hitting post, and I guess maybe that fear of being judged never truly goes away. But I don't know what I've done, and I can't explain what this is, but I honestly feel like I've had to be able to do it, because I am not someone who would want to get up and stand in front of a big room of people and read my poetry. And yet, you know, there's now like 500,000 people who follow me on Instagram, and you know, so many have bought my books, and I really can't allow myself to think about that too much, because it is such a scary thought, laying your heart bare like that. But then I constantly come back to, but these mothers, or parents, I should say, because you know, a lot of fathers actually read my work too. They are the people that I would entrust my heart with, because I know that they get it. They wouldn't be reading this book if they didn't. And you can generally tell the comments from people on Instagram who aren't following me. Even though there is a large following there, if I get a funny comment and I think, that seems a bit left field for someone who knows my work and finds comfort in it, I'll check their profile. No, they don't follow me. So it's like I feel like I have this really beautiful community, but it is still daunting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one comment that springs to mind on the clip, that sounds horrible. I don't want that. If that's what motherhood is like, and it was something to that effect, and it was like, yeah, you just don't get it.
You don't need to say that.
You don't get it.
Just don't comment at all.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And actually, my poem, Dear Husband, the Future Can Wait, that's probably one of my most viral poems that has reached a lot of people. And there's quite a lot of comments of that nature on that poem too. And I think, well, if that's what you're taking from it, then yeah, these words are just not for you.
Yeah.
You know?
But it's so true, and it's so nice, you know, if I see one of your poems and I'm like, oh, yes, and I read it out to my husband, because I'm like, this is how I'm feeling.
This is where I'm at.
This is where I'm at. And it's really beautiful to share it in that way. Obviously, we can't thank you enough for being able to bring that out in us.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jess, as we wrap things up today, we asked you right back at the start for a word to describe the woman you were before you had children. That word that you gave us was ignorant. Now that you are a mum, what's a word that describes the woman you are?
Oh, I guess I would say, again, the first one that comes to me is devoted. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
That's beautiful.
Devoted to them,
Yes.
devoted to learning. Yeah, always learning.
Really want to ask you on that note, one of your books, The Rainbow in My Heart, you wrote that for your son, didn't you? And I think that word just summarizes that so beautifully.
Yeah. Devoted.
I mean, you do so much for the motherhood community, but you are, at the heart of it, a mum to your 3 beautiful kids.
So my boy's on the spectrum, and I had a bit of an idea when he was really young. And one of the biggest battles that he faced was his emotional regulation, which for any toddler is a battle and a challenge anyway, as it is for us as mothers. But this, you know, it went beyond that. And one of the things that I wanted to be able to do with him, he was a very visual person. I wanted to attach colors to emotions, and I wanted to be able to give him the words to express himself. And it it was such a game changer for us, him being able to do that. As soon as he could really articulate how he was feeling, and kind of like, yeah, I guess put a color to, I mean, I can't explain how that helps, but I really feel like it helped him being able to say, I feel really yellow today, or oh, my heart is angry and I'm feeling like an orange, like lava, like it did change for us having that language barrier removed. And it's very similar feedback that I've had from other people that read that book. And it's also one that's easy to remember. Kids know the rhyme, they know what's coming next. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey with that book, and it's helped a lot of kids.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, gorgeous, Jess. Thank you so much for your time and your openness today. We will share in the show notes the links to all of
your goodies.
Beautiful stuff. And of course, the latest thing that you're working on, Lullaby Mum, which I can just say my family are going to be big fans of that. We are addicted to white noise or soft music in our house ever since we introduced the babies. It's just like we can't sleep without it. So I can say for sure we are going to be big fans. So can't wait.
Oh, I can't wait to share it with everybody.
Very exciting.
Thank you so much, Jess. It's been so lovely chatting with you today.
Thank you, Jess.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on How Motherhood Changed Me. We'd love you to be part of the conversation by connecting with us on social media. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review and subscribe.